What is the creepiest and most unexplainable paranormal experience you've ever had? Lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up for a time in my early 20s in Toronto. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike chides me in the morning for banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment at night. We just agreed he must have been dreaming, or it was sounds from other apartments, as I had done no such thing. We agreed that it must have been nothing, and left it at that, but this became a regular nightly occurrence. Shortly thereafter, I started noticing at certain times in my own bedroom the cloying smell of cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp, musty smell. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a damp, musty basement floor near a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough, and you get the idea. What made it even weirder is that I would be filled with a sudden, horrible sense of foreboding a few moments before the smell would begin. Mike flaked out and left only 4 months into our 1-year lease, which meant I was left footing the rent for the entire place until I could find another roommate. I had decided to try and sleep in his bedroom shortly after he moved to see if things would get better. The very first night I slept in his former room, I had an incredibly detailed and realistic nightmare of myself, standing in the dimly lit bathroom of the apartment and cutting my own face with a large shard of glass while staring into the broken bathroom mirror. It was only broken in the dream. Soon after that, I started to hear the loud bangs at night and the flushing of the toilet in the bathroom. Several times the hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast in the middle of the night. One of the freakier things that happened not too long before I moved is the time I was woken up by the TV blaring Poltergeist on City TV at about 2 in the morning. At the time, that channel would always play movies late at night, but the fact that the one time my analog TV, turn a knob to change the channel or the volume, pull a knob to turn it on, turned on by itself at full blast, was the time a movie like Poltergeist was playing. I used to be in the military, and the training camp bunk that we lived in was said to be haunted. Occasionally, our stuff would go missing and reappear in weird places, like under our bed, or inside a bag that we had zipped up and stuff. No big deal, right? I mean, human error and all. Then came the instance that freaked everyone out. It was one night after lights out, and my friend was on his phone texting his girlfriend. Most of us were drifting off to sleep, and were lying on our beds, etc. Suddenly, he heard the shuffling of feet from the corridor. So thinking that it was our sergeant, he quickly hid his phone under his pillow, rolled over on his side and pretended to sleep. Till this day, what happens next chills me to the bone. While he pretended to sleep, he heard someone right behind him, at the other side of his bed, going, "Don't worry, you can continue to pretend sleep." I would dismiss this as a figment of his imagination, except about 5 other people around him heard it as well, including me. Creepier still, there was no one there, and it was the voice of a little girl that said it. For reference, our training camp was in the middle of an island and was set up away from the main admin blocks. The island has been closed by the government for army training purposes for the past 15 years, so there were definitely no civilians around, let alone kids. To make matters freakier, when we came back from our weekend home leave, there was a bunch of female hair on his bed, neatly bundled up, long and jet black. Under his pillow was a note. "Remember me?" Now, as I said, we were in the middle of a forest, in the middle of an island, and at that point in time, there were no female recruits, personnel on the island. Our bunks were locked up for the weekend, and the duty sergeant had no idea that the incident happened. We never spoke about it after that night. Still chills me to the bone thinking about it. I lived in a haunted apartment. It was 2 rooms, but one of the rooms was locked, and I didn't have the key. So I only had one small room as kitchen, dining room, and bedroom, and a screened-in porch. There were 2 especially freaky events. One night, my girlfriend slept over, and she woke up in the middle of the night and said she saw the bathroom door open and a shadowy figure standing in the bathroom, staring at her. The bathroom was right across from the locked room. Another time, I was jerked awake by the fire alarm going off, just blaring. But when I went to unplug it, the alarm stopped, and no other alarm in the building was going off. A lot of the things that happened could have been just my neighbors, but the way they happened was, well, weird. I would hear knocking. It sounded like someone tapping a spoon on a counter, coming from the downstairs apartment. It could have been my neighbor, but I'm not sure why she would do that every couple of minutes for hours on end, or in the middle of the night. I would also hear knocking on the walls. It sounded like someone tapping their way up the wall, like they were looking for a stud. I would also hear this weird moaning, howling that I couldn't trace the source of. Again, could have been a neighbor's dog, but it didn't sound like it was coming from her apartment. The apartment across from me had 3 tenants in a year, I think, because it was just as or more haunted than mine. I had, I think, a unique way of coping. I named the ghost Pete after a previous tenant's mail I would get from time to time, and I tried talking to him, basically treating him like a roommate I wasn't friends with. My girlfriend was much more freaked out by the situation than me, and basically stopped coming over after a few months, so I wasn't there much anyway. When I was, I felt that talking to Pete made the atmosphere of the whole place much more friendly. I also left out a sheet of paper with Pete's notes written on it, and told him if he had any problems, just write them down. I still don't know if I quite believe in ghosts, though I find the supernatural fascinating. But that experience did push me closer to the science doesn't know everything about the universe camp. This happened when I was 17. When I was still living at my childhood home, I was sneaking out late at night to meet some friends. I went through the back door of the house, and as I turned to face the door, I could just feel somebody watching me. I thought I was busted. I turned to look at who had caught me, and saw a totally monochrome figure. The hair was completely black, like blacker than black. Her face was like a static washed over white-gray, and she was wearing a dress that was in between the two colors. No facial features, just the silhouette of a young girl facing me. I reached for the door as fast as I could, and when I went to shut it, it closed very quickly on me. I bolted through my yard and onto the street and couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. I stayed at my friend's that night. Soon after this happened, I was up late with my mom watching a movie. My dad had just passed away. We finish our movie up and say goodnight after turning the TV, stereo receiver, and DVD player, all with their own remotes. After a short amount of time in bed, I am jarred awake by the sound of static, with the speakers cranked up and the TV on with no input. My mom and I meet in the hallway, surprised to see that we had both been awoken to an empty house. A few years ago, when I was 23-ish and graduated from college, I finally told my family about the first occurrence. Before I am able to finish my description of the ghost, she finishes for me, telling me that her and her friend used to see a little girl in our backyard playing in a sundress. She said that she looked maybe 12. Our neighbor, who was the original owner, shared a story with us about the family that originally bought the house after it was built. It was a young family whose daughter passed away from leukemia. She would have been about the right age. Looking back, the girl wasn't scary or harmful. My sister had the same impression. To this day, I believe what we saw and haven't seen anything like it ever since. I also want to say that my dog used to scare the crap out of me because he would randomly stare down the hallway to my sister's room and he would growl with his hair on end. It would always freak me out, and I never connected the two until sometime after seeing the ghost, or whatever it may have been. My grandfather was a bad man, alcoholic, extremely violent, tried to kill my grandmother in front of their kids. One of his less horrible acts was abandoning my grandmother with their 6 kids, all under the age of 12. Some of his kids maintained minimal contact with him. He lived about 30 or 40 miles from my grandmother and the 2 kids who'd stayed in the area. When he was in his 80s, he was hospitalized and then passed away in the middle of the night. In the morning, his oldest child, one of my aunts, went to the morgue to identify the body and fill out paperwork. On her way, she stopped by my grandmother's to break the news. When she came in, my grandmother said, "Oh, it's a sad day. He died just past midnight, I imagine." My grandmother had begun to show some signs of dementia, or just basic old age, and so the weird comments weren't too out of character, and my aunt assumed that the hospital one of her siblings had already called to tell their mother the news. My aunt shook it off and drove to the morgue. When she saw the death certificate, she was shocked to see the time of death listed as 12:10 a.m. On her way home, she stopped back at my grandmother's and asked her who had called her to tell her the news, and asked why she said that she thought he'd died just past midnight. My grandmother said, "He came to see me at 12:30 and we talked for a spell. He wanted to apologize for all he'd done to me and you kids. I think he made his peace and was able to move on, so I'm glad for that." My grandmother then resumed humming and doing a jigsaw puzzle. My grandmother knew her ex-husband had died and the approximate time of his death because his ghost visited her in the middle of the night. I was running on the trails at the Nathan Hale homestead, 18th century farmhouse and property of a Revolutionary War hero, in CT, which is only about a 10-minute drive from my grandmother's lake house. I could not find a map of the trails anywhere online, and there didn't seem to be any signage at the place, just a bunch of random mountain bike trails in the woods. I was only going to run 4 miles, so I estimated that I would run for about 30 minutes, using my watch to keep myself on track. So I ran around the trails for a while and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. It was about 9 on a Monday morning, and the only sounds were the distant hums of Route 31, birds chirping, and the occasional squirrel or deer that scampered off whenever I came near. The trails seemed to wind around a lot and, if not for my better-than-average directional skills, humble brag, I could have easily gotten lost. About 20 minutes in, I saw something strange about 50 meters off. A finely polished, light-colored wooden coffin. I was a little weirded out to say the least, and waited until I got closer for a better look. I rounded a corner where several old tree stumps blocked my view, only to find that the coffin had disappeared. Where it should have been was a clump of ferns. Odd. I turned around shortly thereafter, and made my way back to my car. I was maybe a half-mile out, when I heard a very distinctive knocking on a nearby tree to the rhythm of shave and a haircut. Talk, talk to talk, talk, except no 2 bits. I was a little spooked but chalked it up to be a woodpecker or something. However, not 30 seconds later, there it was on a completely different tree up ahead somewhere. Talk, 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 talk. I picked up the pace. The trail widened a little, and I could see way ahead the entrance to the parking lot where my car was. There it was again, on a tree, seemingly right next to me. Talk, 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 talk. I truly started freaking out and started to book it back to the lot. I was nearing the opening when time seemed to slow down. All of a sudden it felt like the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. The birds stopped singing, and my simple Timex watch started to malfunction, making all sorts of beeping noises and the numbers glitching on the screen. The beat sounded impossibly loud this time, like it was hacked into every surrounding tree with a hand axe. Talk, 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 talk. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I anticipated hearing the 2 bits refrain, and perhaps worse. I burst into the parking lot and everything went back to normal. The temperature was back in the mid-70s and birds were chirping away. I looked at my watch, only to discover that it had gone completely blank. I stood there and stared at it until it flashed 12 Savamanchard Monday, 1:01, January 1st. My watch had reset itself. It had never done this before. I got into the car and started the engine. The clock on the radio display read 12 hours. That couldn't be right. It should have been around 9:30 or 9:45 at the latest. I put her in reverse and backed up to where I could clearly make my way out to the main road. However, as I was about to throw the car into drive as it sat there, I heard a sharp rapping sound on the back window, like someone hitting it with their knuckles. Talk, talk. There was no one else in the parking lot when I had finished my run. No cars, no nothing. I didn't dare look back and hightailed it back to my grandmother's house. I have no idea what could have caused this series of events, and still cannot explain it to this day. I haven't told anyone this story since I was a child, because when I told my cousins what was happening, it scared them really bad, and I got my second only whooping with a belt by my dad. As an adult, I don't mention it because I just don't know what it was, and I don't want other adults to think I'm nuts. When I was in 2nd grade, I woke up one summer night, dead of night, to a woman floating through my window into my bedroom. Oddly, I wasn't scared. I just sat up and asked, "What are you doing here?" I remember she answered me, but oddly enough the next morning I couldn't remember what she said, or even what her voice sounded like. I couldn't even remember what she looked like. So next, I said to her, in true 8-year-old fashion, "Well, you better get going because my dad might wake up and then he'll be mad." She slipped out of my already cracked open bedroom door and I went back to sleep. Sounds like sleep paralysis, right? Wrong. The next day I was really excited that I had my own fairy godmother, and I named her Crystal. And I thought in my head, please come back. Come back and wake me up at dawn so we can talk. I shit you not. The next morning, just as it was getting light outside, I hear someone whispering my name. I realized that this shit was real, and she was a ghost, and I froze. I stayed as still as I could, not even able to breathe, and just prayed as hard as I could. Go away, go away, go away. I could feel her right by my head. As I'm typing this, tears are coming to my eyes. Okay, happened once. Coincidence, right? Nope. Every time I would get brave and say out loud to her before going to bed in my room, "Okay, come this time I swear I won't get scared." She would come, whispering my name, and I would almost shit my pants in fear and never open my eyes. So at this point I'm thinking, still could be night terrors, right? I mean, our eyes have receptors sensitive to light that wake us up, thus causing me to wake up at dawn and hallucinate this shit. Here's where shit gets real. Next summer I tell a friend that this is going on while we were camping together. She doesn't believe me, says to me, "Okay, ask her to come tonight. We're sleeping in same tent and my friend wants to see for herself." So I do. And at dawn, I hear her, calling my name and my friend's name. We don't move, she leaves, and we both sit up, and my friend heard her too. She freaks out, tells her parents later that day sobbing. I'd get in trouble for scaring the shit out of kids with ghost stories. Later that summer I told my cousin this story, and before that night, she freaks out, tells her mom, and I get my ass beat for telling ghost stories. I got pissed about said beating and angrily said out loud, "I got in trouble because of you, and I never want to see you ever again." And I haven't, ever. Thank fucking God. And I just don't think about it anymore, and never when I'm alone at night.